We are joined on Issues and Interviews with Kieran Lalor on the Hudson Power Broker YouTube channel. We're joined by frequent guest Domenic Broccoli, local businessman and consultant Greg Lane. Good morning, gentlemen. How are you?
How are you, Kieran? Thanks for having us.
Good morning, Kieran.
Good to be on with you. This is the first time since we've been in the video era of Issues and Interviews that we've had multiple guests. So that's why I'm in the middle. That's why I'm in the center square. And Dom, we've had you on a number of times on the radio over the years, and you have this interesting historical project going on in Fishkill. Last I remember, last year, April 2019, you got your site plan approval, which we thought was a big hurdle at the time. You got all that. So what's the latest? What's going on? You have shovels in the ground yet? What?
Well, before I talk about our approval process, Kieran, I want to announce a discovery that we made that's so despicable, Greg. Kieran, even I couldn't imagine it. What I discovered is that we believe that Bill Sandy, archaeologist Bill Sandy, and FBI agent Lance Ashworth, who's a West Point graduate, dug into the graves one of the graves that we found in 2007, and we believe that they planted Revolutionary War artifacts such as buttons, because Mr. Ashworth often talks about the fact that buttons were discovered in the grave, when in fact that's not true. Now, if you listen to Lance Ashworth in this audio, he talks about how he knows that there's proof that this is a Revolutionary War site. Listen to this, and then listen to the next video when he talks about trying to prove that it's a veterans cemetery. Revolutionary War soldiers would be veterans. And listen to how he says, but we need to get on the property to dig.
What do you expect to find studying the land further?
I am confident, beyond confident, that the bodies that are located on the property that have already been found are Revolutionary War soldiers. I'm also confident that the foundations, many of the foundations, I should say, that are on the property date to the Revolution.
You know, we've had talks with the, like the cemetery, Veterans Cemetery Division of Veterans Affairs, but they want overwhelming proof that these guys are who they are. You know, we know that the buttons and the uniforms and the nails and all that stuff surrounded the bodies that were found, but remember, the developer is not allowing any other examination to be done. So the sort of examination that we would need to be done in order to make that threshold for the U.S. government is not possible.
Now, how could he be so confident? Beyond confident means guarantee you that there's buttons in there. If not an archaeological study showed a button, not a historic document showed that there's a burial ground there. That's why he's been trying so hard, this group, to get me to do another dig, because they planted these things all over my property. And I'm going to discuss in a couple of minutes the evidence that led us to believe this. But first, we want to discuss the water and sewer. We needed to get water and sewer in order to get our approvals. So Lance Ashworth hooked up with the Democratic Party, Mr. Ozzy Albra, to overturn, because Ozzy made a promise that he would overturn my approvals if elected as supervisor. And the only thing we needed, Greg, I keep calling you Greg, I'm sorry. The only thing we needed, Kieran, was our water and sewer approval. So in 2019, just a month prior to Ozzy taking office, he had a discussion with Mr. Lane. Greg, why don't you tell the story of what took place?
Sure, Domenic. Kieran, back in December when Domenic had his first sewer and water public hearing, the hearing went rather quickly. Only a handful of folks from the Friends of the Fishkill Supply Depot attended the meeting and spoke out in opposition, and the supervisor ended the meeting. And on the way out, I approached Ozzy Albarrán and congratulated him on his recent election. And given it, as you pointed out, Kieran, that we were at the end of the road of the approval process, I offered to set up a meeting for Domenic and Ozzy to sit down and discuss the future of the project. At which point he said to me he had no interest in meeting with Domenic unless he was willing to donate the burial area to the town of Fishkill.
Wow.
So that made me think, Kieran, why would a town supervisor want an unidentified burial ground to become the burden of the taxpayers? And the only reason I could come up with is that Lance Ashworth, who now helped Ozzy, and Ozzy had to pay back Lance for his favor, is telling everybody that I paid off archaeologists and that there were buttons. And I did not want those buttons to be disclosed in the ruins and in the burial ground because I would have assumed that the project would have been destroyed.
Let me just stop right there because I want to clear up a couple of things that I'm confused about. One, in the past on the show, we had audio of one of the founders saying they buried bones on your property. That was burying bones. So you're saying they buried bones and buttons? Is that what you're saying?
They seeded my entire property, Kieran. They dug graves on the north. They seeded the ruins on the north. There's stone ruins that I was told by the previous owner was a retaining wall. They turned that retaining wall into what they're going to claim is a stable from the revolution. But before we get to that, I want to talk about what they did that I discovered recently. There were 7 grave features that were exposed in 2007. And in 2009, Mr. Sandy told Mara Farrell, who started this project, okay, this group, I mean, and he told Mara that the graves were looted in on October of 2009. He said the graves were looted. If you look at this photo from November 1st with the leaf coverage and the foliage and the weeds, nobody in their right mind would know that there's a burial ground there. The only person that would know that was archaeologist Bill Sandy. Okay, now if you look here in June 9th, 2009, in this photo of June 2009, when Chuck Schumer was on the property, you could see that the burial trench was already partially backfilled. There is no evidence of grave features. Now, if you look at November 1st, 2009, the southern tip is closest to us. There's no gravel, there's nothing. There's just little flags there. That's after they backfilled, which Bill Sandy claimed that somebody looted. Now, if you look at the June, how would anyone have known where the burials are in October? Because if you look at November, look at all the leaves, grass, and weeds that grew on top of the property to the right and left of that area they backfilled. Now, if you look at November 9th, 2009, you still see no gravel on the southern tip of the burial trench. However, on May 29th, 2010, you see the 2 little flags in the left corner are still there, so that's the same area, but now it has gravel. There was no gravel on my property, Kieran. Somebody placed that gravel. Now, if you look at how much importance they give that little area where the gravel is, we have photographs of their website, their Facebook page, and their brochure. You see the area circled? Look how they keep showing that area with the gravel in all 3 of these slides, okay? What was so significant about that area of the gravel? I didn't know until we did. So because Ozzy said he wanted the burial ground, that led me to do a ground penetrating radar in 2020, in March of 2020, in the burial area. I wanted to do 2 things, Kieran. I wanted to put to bed this whole thing that radar detected 320 graves, and we did that. She found that the area, and she did a very precise GPR study, and she said there's 20 anomalies that could possibly be burials, but she believes there's maybe a dozen because there were a lot of dead trees and things like that on the site. She then did a LIDAR. LIDAR is a new scientific procedure where it looks like a pole with a frisbee on top. What LIDAR is going to show is disturbance of the above ground. So she went into the burial trench. I got to go back to the GPR. And she found that on the southern tip of the burial trench, where that gravel was, that 1 or 2 graves were disturbed at 4 to 4.5 feet deep, which is the same depth as the grave that we uncovered in 2007. Now, Bill Sandy was the only person that would have known where that burial is. Now, if you look at this photo, you could see Bill Sandy is kneeling in the burial trench, and you see the burial features near the road. Now, if you look at the GPR, where we did this GPR and the white flags, that's the area where she found disturbance in the grave near the road. You could see the Maya Cafe in the background. And if you look at where those kids are standing, where the gravel is, you could see Maya Cafe in the background near the road. Very similar. That's the area. So then she did, like I was starting to say, LIDAR. She now detected GPR disturbance under the ground, and LIDAR showed disturbance in that same exact area above the ground disturbance. You see that the trench is pretty evenly backfilled until it goes to the area where the gravel is. Then she did a metal detector because I told her I believe he buried buttons. When she did the metal detector, she not only did the burial trench, she did any anomaly that could possibly be a burial. So the 20 anomalies that she said may be burials, which we know there were 7 in the trench that we discovered in 2007, not a single one showed any frequencies of metal other than the southern tip that was disturbed at 4 to 4.5 feet, which was covered by gravel. So what they'll do, Kieran, is they'll place gravel or rocks or something. So in the future, if they want to dig there, they just rake up all the leaves and everything. They find their gravel. Voila, I'm going to find buttons right here. And that's what Mr. Bill Sandy did. That's what Mr. Lance Ashworth did, which leads us to believe that this group dug into a human burial, planted buttons, and are trying to get the town supervisor to take the burial, possession of the burial, so that they could dig it up, find these buttons, and say, we told you Mr. Broccoli lied in the reports, but Mr. Broccoli didn't lie. These people deceived everybody, and they used the burial ground as a way to fundraise. I found an email from Bill Sandy and Mara Farrell, which talks about how cemetery projects get people's emotion, as you could read here, and their beliefs, and they use dollars like nothing else. They made people believe that this was a Revolutionary War cemetery so that people would donate to their cause, and then they would take my property away. You want to talk about despicable. I then did a GPR on the north side of the property, not GPR, metal detecting on the foundations, because they keep telling people that the foundations are from the Revolution. And what I discovered, again, is despicable. There was a L-shaped stone wall in 2007. And in 2020, in order for her to do the metal detecting, I had a guy cut the weeds so that she could run right along the top of these stones, which were examined in 1970s by Temple twice and by Greenhouse in 2007. And no Revolutionary War artifacts or horse or stable related artifacts were discovered. But what I did discover is somebody covered up the western wall, as you could see in this photograph. They covered the western wall, and if you look at the 2009 report, the L-shaped wall is not in the 2009 report. What is in the 2009 report is just the southern wall, which proves that they backfilled this and seeded it again with metal. So when I was raking the weeds, I found this not revolutionary, I'd say what they call an 18th century strap hinge, something that you would use in a stable, Kieran. It came out of the dirt that's on top of the rocks that they threw dirt on, okay? I was told by archaeologists, between the weeds growing for the past 11 years, this was done in 2009, and the frost, it pushed this artifact to the surface. So when I was raking, the teeth of my rake caught it and pulled it out. And there's no way that anyone could deny that was planted because it's on top of rocks that were exposed in 2007. So that means that the 2009 report was fudged in order to stop my development.
Which was a corner of perhaps the stables. And in the management summary of the 2009 report for that dig, in the last paragraph, it says that they recommend further archaeological work.
Okay, so there's a burial area, all right? The town wanted to take it from you, you believe, so they could do archaeology. Who's buried in the burial area?
Nobody knows. It's unidentified. So what they did by planting buttons, they're saying it's a Revolutionary War cemetery.
But I remember you telling me that there are coffin nails found and Revolutionary soldiers didn't get buried in coffins and things like that. So is there something to say that they're not revolutionary? Do people live on the property in the 250
Well,
years?
it was a farm, Kieran, in the 1600s. And then in the 1700s, obviously, the revolution broke out. And there were barracks to the west of back then it was called Albany Post Road. And there was supposedly a stable on my property that ran perpendicular to Albany Post Road, very close to the Van Wyck homestead, which was used as a military headquarters, at one of the headquarters in the Fishkill Supply Depot. Because as you know, the Fishkill Supply Depot spanned from the Hudson River to East Fishkill, and it went to the Putnam Valley border. That's where the lower barracks was. The lower barracks was a hospital, a barracks that was used as the major hospital, but they don't say that. And if you read their Hunter report, which is another story, they never discussed that because there was a DAR monument on my property, and Lance Ashworth says that that was a cemetery marker. It wasn't a cemetery marker for the burials found on my property. It was a cemetery marker for the graves at the lower barracks, because if you read the DAR dedication ceremony, that's what they say, yonder barracks and hospital where the soldiers lie. So this is what they did. They fudged the history of Fishkill to match the archaeology, what they planted on my property. So it wasn't real archaeology what they did. It's they fudged all this. They planted, seeded graves. They seeded the burials, the ruins. Kieran, this was like their insurance policy. It's sort of like entrapment, what they did. They were trying to get me to conduct another dig, as you see in these emails and newspaper articles. And then once I did the other dig, they wanted me to discover their fabricated or planted artifacts. And then they would accuse me of fudging my reports and that there were really buttons in the graves, when in fact that's not true. Then they're accusing me of bribing archaeologists. As you see here, Penny Steyer, Bill Sandy's girlfriend, accused me of paying off Bill Sandy when that is not true at all. And then they would demand that the town overturn my approvals based on the fact that it's all fraudulent, when that is not true. This group should be arrested for what they did, and they took money from people. They took money from descendants of soldiers who are not even buried on the property. That is an undermining thing that an FBI agent did with a corrupt archaeologist.
So there are some burials on your property. Is like what, 10 acres?
The property's 12 acres total. 2 acres are residential.
Okay. And then
so 10 acres of development, yes.
So your project, would it be built on top of the burials, regardless of who's?
In 2007, when we found those burials, regardless if they were who they were, we said to the SHPO, that's the State Historic Preservation Office, that we weren't going to build there. We were going to preserve it. So this whole preservation battle was all fudged. And as you could see with Bill Sandy's email, this was all to make people get emotional that their soldiers buried there so that they could get dollars like nothing else. Terrible. So that tells the story, Kieran. It shows you he wanted to dig on my property so he could uncover his buttons and therefore say it's a Revolutionary War cemetery. So I believe he did the same thing to the town supervisor because either Ozzy's involved in this or he bought into this story. And then they voted down our water and sewer so that we cannot go forward with my development. And why Mr. Abra's team of board, this new board, voted against our project, and tell me if I'm wrong here, Greg, is they said they voted it down because of my Board of Health the Dutchess County Board of Health did not approve my application. But you can't get in front of the Board of Health until you get an approval from the town. So that's putting the cart in front of the horse. So without the approval from the town, I can't go in front of the Board of Health for water and sewer approval. They're not going to approve water and sewer just because you own a piece of property. They have to have a reason. And the reason would be that the board approved water and sewer. So the whole thing is just a big scam.
Greg, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, Kieran, as you started off earlier, Domenic is really at the goal line of getting his approvals. The project had been through a 5-year review process where archaeologists from the state, experts from the county, an independent archaeologist that the town hired, all had reviewed the project, concluded that what Domenic was doing was preserving the barrel area and going to a great extent to not only preserve it, but to tell the history of the Fishkill Supply Depot with walking trails, living museum, a visitor center, and they were very complimentary of Domenic's proposal. Even after that review, when Domenic started to move forward with the sewer and water request, the town understood that sewer and water was a right. It was, basically equivalent to Domenic's property rights. And by stopping that, would be taking away his property rights and violating his ability to develop his property. The town council actually, under the previous administration, actually concluded that the town board had to provide Domenic sewer and water, not only because he had been through the approval process, but there's already sewer and water on the property servicing a gas station and a car wash. So what he was really asking for was extra sewer, extra water capacity to complete his vision. So out of desperation, this board came up with a very flimsy argument that Domenic and his attorneys feel will be overturned through the appeals process.
First, we have to get the owner into a position where nobody is going to allow him to develop the site. So that requires us to influence the town of Fishkill to convince them that this is really, truly a unique Revolutionary War site. And then once all the planning is blocked and the owner realizes, oh, shit, I can't do anything with this thing anyway, I might as well sell to these crazies who are trying to save it, and then have him bring his price down.
This was all payback for political favor, Kieran. They owed a favor to Lance Ashworth for helping them win. They only won by a few votes. It wasn't a landslide. So he was indebted to Mr. Ashworth, and they came up with this ridiculous reason to stop my development. Now, don't remember, Kieran, they used to always talk about this. My property was the largest revolutionary cemetery in the country. You don't hear that anymore because we debunked that whole claim. So this whole group was all about fraud. We found out, again, through the lawsuit, that Lance Ashworth, who's a West Point graduate, was trying to make this a Revolutionary War tourist attraction because he was trying to get this West Point Distinguished Graduate Award from West Point. That was his motive. You understand? Because they say that they're poor patriots and I'm this big bad developer. They went after my character like nobody's business. They made me out to being this mean guy who's corrupt developer. I'm not a developer, Kieran. As you know, I own IHOPs in the Bronx, and I was in the restaurant business since forever. My family had Gino's Cafe in the Bronx. My first job was in Fishkill. My family moved to Fishkill in 1961. I've spent summers in Fishkill with my cousin. My first job was at my father's restaurant on Route 82, Gino's Cafe, when I was 15 years old, and I graduated from the Culinary Institute. So I was educated in Dutchess County. And these people make me out to be an outsider? Lance Ashworth was the outsider. He moved to Fishkill in 2008. So I have more roots than any of these people that belong to this group. But that was all to make me out to look like a criminal. We have them on tape calling me mafia. It's despicable what these people did, because they figured by destroying my character, nobody would believe when I tell them that they're lying, because they would make it seem like, oh, how could you believe this guy? We're not lying. We're patriots. I'm a West Point graduate. He's an archaeologist. And Mara Farrell is the publicist or public relations expert who got all this misinformation to the public and spoke in front of Congress, making them believe that this was a Revolutionary War site. And her husband at my public hearing told me what a despicable person I am, and I should donate my property. I'm going to donate property that your wife seeded and planted buttons and lied in my reports. And in the 2016 Hunter report, all fraud. And I posted all these videos exposing these people, which Ozzy Albra said he saw on our Continental Commons Facebook page. So no one could say that they don't know this group is fraudulent, because I've been putting since 2016 photos and videos on our Facebook page. And that's pretty much everything I have to say. Any other questions?
I'm done with this guy. Hey, I remember that I played on the radio in the past. Friends say we're going to strangle and bleed this guy. Property has no value, and he's just going to give it away.
We're going to keep on telling people about it. The land value is going to be down. He's going to be like, shit, the only ones I can sell it to are these guys.
Yeah.
We're going to strangle them, basically, lead them out.
Yeah.
Is this one for the latest in a long line of strangling tactics, you think?
That's exactly what it is. In 2012, I hired people to go videotape them, and Greg was the first one to do a video, and they would go on my property without my permission. And in 2012, Bill Sandy was on the property talking about graves on the north side of the property. I had no idea what he was talking about until I started posting the videos online and showing people what these people did to me. And then people in the community came to me and said they were on my property and Bill Sandy told them they were graves on the north side. And we did GPR in 2012 and we thought they were graves, but they were holes the same depth as the grave that we discovered in 2007, but they contained leaves, grass, and tangled rootlets. And when I said to the archaeologist, do you think these people dug these fake graves? And he said, Dominic, you're from the Bronx. People don't do shit like that. Excuse my language. But turns out Dominic was right. They dug graves on the north, they buried bones on the north, and they fudged all the archaeology.
The graves themselves have not been dug. I partially dug one of the burials. There's no doubt that there are plenty of soldiers' graves and other archaeological features relating to the Revolutionary War.
What a scam. It has so many tentacles, it's hard to discuss in a half an hour, Kieran.